What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
What kind of ignorant shit is that?
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
You idiot, you fool!
Hey, dummy!
This is the Ignorance is Blessed podcast.
Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
Or you can like clap. So
Yeah, that's true. It's so weird with Zoom. Also, I wasn't recording that whole conversation, so I can just start at the beginning. You guys, hi. Really fun conversation about tech stuff that will have been cut out at this point. I am sitting down with Sapphire Sandalo. Amazing. Hi. Just, is there anything you don't do? Like animator, voiceover, you direct, you can sing.
Well, I don't do sports.
I mean, a good call, honestly, in this day and age. You made the right call. I'm with you on that. So incredibly talented. And a little background for anyone listening. I'll just, be honest. I put out a tweet looking for persons of color to talk to me about their experience with mental health and how it affects them or their community. And voila, the internet is magical. And you reached out to me. Thank God. Anytime I tweet like that, I'm like, is this going up to space? Also, is this an offensive thing to ask? Like, I'm like, Twitter's a hellscape.
No, but sometimes it can be good.
Yeah,
like
no, it's like in this case, I'm so grateful that you got back to me. I don't think I've ever, so you're Filipina American. Am I saying that correctly?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Filipino.
I don't think I've ever had a guest on, which now I'm thinking that and I'm like, I'm shit.
I'm your first.
Yay! We did it. We survived. We made it. Thank you so much. What a gift. Which I guess it surprises me more because I grew up in Alaska and we have a pretty big Filipino population, and a lot of my friends up there, growing up were it was like a diverse pool. But then I just realized, I guess once I've gotten into Hollywood, and maybe this is also a testament to the industry. Mm-hmm. I don't. Oh no! It's like I'm not running into. Well, that's a whole different podcast. Yeah. That's so. I'm sorry. I'm like so off the rails right now. I just had a cup of coffee and
oh my God, you're fine.
I know. I'm thinking about I started writing a pilot about being from Alaska, and I was like, we have to have a Filipino character. We need a Polynesian. And then I remember as I was trying to cast it, going comparing my characters to an actress and falling short on so many characters and being like, I mean, I could recommend my friends that remind me of this character, but I couldn't think of big actresses, which is angering and a completely different topic.
They exist though.
Yes. Cast them. Damn it.
Oh, just a sec. Oh,
yes.
I don't know if it's weird for you, but my connection's kind of weird. You keep freezing and then not.
No.
I don't know if that's happening for you.
It's not happening on my end.
Okay. I just wanted to call that out before we kept going because I'm not sure if that's my issue.
I don't. You're not the first person to say that. I've had the last 2 interviews I've done. There's been a weird delay. Hang on, I'm gonna pause and just try switching to the other Wi-Fi and see if it helps. Because it's
okay.
Yeah, it's fine on my end, but I'll lose you for a second. I'm gonna pause everyone.
Okay. Any other windows open?
Let me close. Good call.
We're gonna troubleshoot this.
Where it's teamwork. Let's see. And usually think to do that. And you're absolutely right. I have quite a few windows open. Technology is
go.
fun. Okay. All right. I think I closed everything.
Okay. You haven't frozen yet, so.
Okay. Well, let me know.
Okay.
Oh, God, I miss being able to just be a human in person.
I know.
It's like for all of the little bits of technology and using stuff that I've learned because of quarantine, I still suck so bad at so much. I'm just like, I don't know, it's on. I don't know why it's not working. It's like things will not turn on and it's like they're unplugged. And I'm like, it's broken. It's like, no, it's just unplugged. It's fine. This is so funny that I'm like sweating in my apartment because I turned the air off and I'm like, let's talk about mental health. That woman looks like she's having a breakdown. I mean, on that note, let's dive into mental health in your community and how it's addressed, because I feel like right now everyone's going through, an exceptionally unique time. I feel like we're kind of in this group trauma almost, but I mean, as a population, America has so much underlying depression and anxiety among, other mental health struggles. And I'm curious to hear how that's addressed, like in your family or maybe the Filipino community, what you've noticed, how people handle depression as an illness versus like, just suck it up, walk it off,
Yeah. So, Filipino Americans are now, I believe, the second largest group of Asian American immigrants in America. And we have some of the highest rates of anxiety and depression. But despite that, and I mean, those numbers could be higher because not everyone is diagnosed with it. Right?
Yeah, or even talking about it. Like they're just tucking it in and like, no, I'm fine.
Yeah, and that is part of the problem is that, well, I'm only speaking for like the Asian American and the Filipino American communities, but mental health is definitely not a topic that is ever really discussed. It's sort of not seen as to even exist, which is the main problem. Yeah, like I feel like in America right now we're seeing this this increase of mental health awareness. We're talking about how we're feeling and we're normalizing going to therapy and like all of this stuff, and that's not really happening with our parents. Yeah, so it's a cultural and a generational issue.
Of course.
Yeah, and so like, well, for example, I recently began going to therapy for the first time. So I started maybe last year in November. So like,
yay, congratulations.
Thank you.
Big step.
Yeah, and I was unemployed, and so literally all my money right now is going to therapy, and I'm like, no, this is a necessity. Like
I feel you.
Right, it's really important, and honestly should not be a luxury the way that it is. Like it should just be readily available for everyone.
Absolutely. And I sometimes think that's what holds up that stigma of, oh, it's not real or it's not as serious of an issue, because we live in a society where it's seen as a luxury item, where it's just like, I picture, just a white woman in a big hat being like, I need duct tape for my emotions, like just paying someone to listen to them complain. And it's like, that's not what therapy should, that's what the image it should convey.
Yeah. And so like a couple, I don't know when this was, maybe a couple months ago, maybe 1 or 2 months ago, I was on the phone with my dad, and we were talking because I had also recently started a new medication because I was diagnosed with high blood pressure. So I was on this new medication, and he also has it too. That's why I have it.
Yeah.
And so
Hooray
thanks,
for
Dad,
genetics. Yeah.
for my crappy heart. So we were just talking about like how the medication is like sitting with me and all this stuff. And okay, so I'm taking a beta blocker, which I don't know if you've heard, but like people can also use them to ease anxiety.
Yeah, that's so funny is that when you say beta blocker, that was my thought. I was like, wait,
Yeah.
isn't that like for anxiety?
Yeah, it can be used for that.
Well, it
Like
makes sense that it would
relaxes.
also lower your blood pressure to lower your anxiety. So
Yeah.
it almost makes sense that those things would
Mhm.
be kind of, I don't know, flow together.
Yeah, it goes hand in hand. And so like that was the nice little side effect of me taking these beta blockers, is that I do feel more calm. Like I do still
Nice.
get nervous, but I'm nowhere near the level that I was at before I took them. So it's changed my life. Anyways, a huge fan.
Yay.
And so when I was on the phone with my dad, I forget like exactly how this came up, but I had mentioned that I was under a lot of stress, and I mentioned the word anxiety, and he said, "What what do you mean? Anxiety? What is anxiety?" And like it
Whoa.
didn't occur, just because, in my circles the word anxiety is literally tossed around all the time. We're all like, "Oh, so
Oh my God.
anxious."
Yeah. It's like
Right?
it's like a personality trait at this point.
Yeah,
It's like
right.
depression or anxiety. Both? Cool. Me too.
Yeah. And for like it just for like I just forgot that he actually, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Wow, hi. I'm not saying words right now. But it threw me off entirely to hear him ask what that meant. And honestly, being on the beta blockers helped me with that conversation, because I know that like old Sapphire would have been like heart pounding, like I'm gonna go and just like hang up.
Yeah, never
But
mind.
yeah, exactly. It was like, oh, forget I said anything, and then just like
Yeah, you're like,
leave.
I'm not crazy. And you hang up.
Yeah, but like because I was on this medication, I felt a little bit more. I felt a little courageous, and I was like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna have this really uncomfortable conversation with my dad that I was not planning on having, but I feel like I need to say. And so like it's me and my dad don't really talk about these types of things. So
I
that
mean,
alone, yeah, that
yeah.
was also stressful for me. And so I was like, okay, how do I talk about this? And so I mentioned like anxiety is when your body reacts in a physical way, or I don't even remember how I described it. Um, but I remember feeling very flustered because I didn't know how to describe it to him,
Yeah.
because there's so many layers to it. And then like also knew that like he would think I was being ridiculous. So I'm like, okay, how do I say this? I don't know. It was just
Yeah.
like a lot. And then I tried to explain it, and then he said, "Well," he's like, "Well, Sapphire, like let me ask you this, like when we go to the Philippines, do you ever see anybody crying or stressed out?" And
Oh,
I
no.
and then yeah, and I had to think for a second, because I was like, "Okay, how do I respond to that?" Because that is so not even I don't even know. But like I was like, "Well, Dad, like just because you do not see it doesn't mean that people aren't struggling. Like mental health is an invisible disease. So
Yes.
just because you don't see people crying, also that's not an indication of whether or not people are depressed or anxious.
I
A lot of people
know.
keep it inside." And he was like, okay. And I actually made this like connection pretty recently between like that statement that he made about not seeing sad people in the Philippines, which there are sad people in the Philippines. What the
Yeah.
hell? And I forgot to mention something. So my dad grew up very poor, and
And
he
is
actually
he
has a
like from
really
the Philippines and he moved over
yeah.
here? Okay.
Yes. He grew
Okay.
up in the Philippines. And he is the American dream. Like he grew up very poor in the Philippines. He studied to become a nurse, and then he got a job out here in America, and he's very successful. And so like to him, um that because he's been successful in that way, that tells him, okay, no one has any excuse.
Yeah.
And that's actually really common for a lot of immigrant parents. here
Oh,
now
yeah.
in America. Right. They see that and they go, well, like I was able to like come out of my poverty and all of the struggles that I had to move to America and like be successful. And so you have literally no reason to be sad. Like,
Yeah,
that
like
is
you're
kind of the
set
vibe.
up to succeed is the idea that it's like you don't,
Right.
when you overcome so much, I think it's easy to, I feel like so many people do this where they, if you have a big struggle, you can't see how other people are struggling with something that seems so much smaller than what you went through. That you're like,
Right.
this is nothing.
Yeah, and it's that comparing that is the problem, because
Absolutely.
like am I grateful for the fact that like I was raised like in a middle class family and had like a really good school, and like I was very privileged in that way, and like I do recognize that, but it's like because they gave us such a good life, that's why I'm able to focus on my mental health.
Yeah, it's like the
Yeah.
hierarchy of needs that it's like that, and that's what I always say that when I talk about I make jokes about it in my act, but I sort of talk about depression being a privilege, which is not what I mean when I say that sentence, because I know there's a whole bunch of red flags, but going up like, how dare you, just at that statement, but the having the time and the facilities to address your mental health. Because it's like, yeah, no, a lot of people couldn't address it because, of course, when you're in this state of, you know, adrenaline and survival mode, and you don't have time to go, well, what are these feelings? It's just like, no, I have to, you know, make my money to feed myself and my family and put a roof over my head. And there's not time to acknowledge those feelings. It doesn't mean they're going on, but it's just, you're almost in that hyper state of not being able to sort out what you're even feeling.
Right. But you're still feeling those things. And that's what is so like, I don't know, what makes it a little bit more intense, because like, just because you don't have a name for it doesn't mean that you're not experiencing it. Like, and I had brought this up with my therapist. I told her about that conversation that I had with my dad, because I was like, I wasn't prepared for that. And it was really frustrating that it felt like he was invalidating how I felt when here I was trying to tell him like, hey, this is a part of me and this is something I'm trying to fix. And then, you know, him responding in a way that's like, oh, but what are you trying to fix? I don't understand.
There's nothing to fix.
Yeah. And so she said, well, you know, next time that comes up, maybe tell him, you know, like what worked for you. It's great that worked for you. But that same strategy of compartmentalizing everything in your head, like that doesn't work for me. And I was like, oh, wow, that's like really good.
I know. I love that. I was like, oh, what a nugget. I'm going to take that.
Yes, please,
pocket.
everybody use it. So the thing that I mentioned earlier, and I just realized I didn't finish that thought, was because what am I saying? I made this connection between my dad saying that there are no sad people in the Philippines to something that him and my mom used to say all the time to me when I was little. So I have what people call a resting bitch face. And it was very, very prominent when I was a child. So I just looked miserable all the time. Even that was just me being neutral. That's how I saw it. I was like, I'm just neutral. And so they would always be like, Sapphire, why don't you smile? People will like you better if you smile. Yeah. And obviously, like now as an adult, I look back at that and go, God, it's so messed up. But I would always tell them, I'll smile if I have a reason to smile.
Oh my gosh, I love it. So deep. You're like, give me something to smile about.
I know. I was such an emo kid. And then they would come back with, you have so many reasons to smile. You have a house, you have food. And I'm like, that's true. You know, I am very privileged again, like in that way. I have no reason to be miserable. But the thing was, like, I wasn't miserable. I just wasn't smiling.
Yeah, where it's like, why do I have to
like,
smile?
I made that connection of how they equate you looking like you are happy and well and whatever to how you're feeling on the inside.
That's, I mean, what a way to put it. That it's like, yeah. I mean, just what a connection from that. You don't see people crying and sad in the Philippines, and it's like, yeah, not everyone is wearing their emotions on their face for your benefit also, is like, like when you're smiling when you're not happy or like not feeling overjoyed, it's like, that's not for you. That's, at that point, you're just like, I want to make sure everyone else is comfortable, so I'll put this face on, which is probably like feeds into the reflection of, yeah, it's probably what a lot of people are doing instead of crying. I mean, there was a thing recently about, and I mean, it's like completely, you know, different culture, but it speaks to this same thing. Japan had like a thing released where they're like telling people, it's in regards to anxiety and being stressed out, but they like have this whole campaign, which more or less is like a tuck it in, but there's this whole phrase called scream inside your heart.
What?
Yeah, like they put it on, it was at a theme park, so on all the roller coasters, because screaming, you know, releases, you know, particles and COVID and blah, blah. There's just signs that say scream inside your heart, and it's like, what? How do we? It's just so interesting, that mindset of, well, if I didn't feel bad, you shouldn't feel bad. And I think that's a thing that affects just a lot of people in general, is not being able to see outside your own experience. And that's so relatable, especially just hearing your dad literally go like, what is anxiety? Because as you said, trying to explain it, it's hard to put words around because it covers so much. It's like a word that you're like, it's anxiety. Like if you're familiar with it and it's been a part of your vocabulary, you're like, wow, how can you break that down into more?
Yeah, and what made it even more difficult is that I remember I used the word nervous. I'm like, I just feel like I'm nervous all the time. And he was like, what are you nervous about? And I'm just like, how do I explain that? Because it's like there's certain triggers. And honestly, in my head, I remember feeling like, I'm nervous about this conversation right now.
Yeah, everything.
And literally everything. And he was just like, he's like, what do you have to be stressed about? Because, you know, like, it's the same thing. Like, you have a house, you have food, and he kept saying like, you're doing fine. But in the moment, because there are a lot of things that like that my dad didn't know about. And so I was just like, do I take this moment to talk about it? Or do I just like try to move on? I chose to move on because I was like, I'm not in the mood to talk about it. But wait, there was another thing I wanted to say. To my dad's defense, like, I can't blame him for thinking the way he thinks, and my mom the same way, just because the topic of mental health was not as prominent when they were growing up as it is for us.
Of course.
You know, it's just, it was just weird though that like my dad, like, he works in the medical field, knows everything about like the body physically, but when it comes to on the inside, it's just like a whole another world that he knows nothing about.
Yeah, which is just so interesting and telling of the medical community as well, that like it's such a separate branch and a separate thing that, I mean, there's so many, you know, so many physical ailments people experience are probably tied to what's going on with their if they have unaddressed mental health issues. And, you know, depending on who you're speaking with as far as the medical community, that could go potentially completely overlooked. And it's just like, yeah, I don't know, you're just cold, so deal with it. Or I don't know. That's a weird example, I guess. But I just had a conversation with another woman who's going to be on the podcast, actually, but I think the reason that popped in my head is she was talking about police and how they view, you know, people, citizens out in the world. And she was having a conversation with an officer, and it was pretty hot outside, and a man in like a bunch of coats walked by, and how she was like, how do you view that? And the cop is like, oh, you know, I see that, and I think maybe he's concealing a weapon. And she spoke about how with schizophrenia, your body temperature is dysregulated, which I was unfamiliar with. that's a thing I didn't know, and how, you know, you might feel colder than what seems appropriate to the, I don't know, outside. This is sort of a weird tangent to go off on, but
No, I didn't know that. That's interesting. And that's true though. You know, like a lot of our mental health or mental issues will affect us physically. So
yeah,
when
it's
you
like if you don't
understand,
address it,
right.
yeah, it'll come
Yeah.
out in
Mm-hmm.
physical ways. And that's not to dismiss any, I mean, I feel like it would just be just as bad to go in because you're having physical ailments and someone be like, it's all in your head. And you're like, I can't walk.
Right.
But you mentioned in that conversation, you chose to kind of, let's move on instead of dive into, you know, all the things that might be causing my anxiety in a
Right.
conversation with your dad. Do you find that, because I think to an extent, maybe sometimes with parents, at least with mine, I hit walls where I go, I'm just gonna have to accept that this is a thing that you're not
Yeah.
gonna understand where I'm coming from, instead of trying to force it. Do you
Yeah.
find that sometimes that's just the best thing to do is go, okay, we're just not gonna see eye to eye?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I didn't mention this yet, but he is a Trump supporter. So
Oh God,
like,
I'm in the same boat.
yeah, so it's like when he starts those conversations, I'm like, nope,
Yeah, we're just
not
like,
engaging.
oh my God. I mean, yeah, no, I have parents who I think mean well. Like it's like, I think like they're like Republican as if it's a sports team at this point. It feels like that they're like anyone, just not the Democrats, which is enraging in so many ways. But oh God, like they're like the why don't all lives matter type of people, and trying to have that conversation and meet them where they're at, where it just is this like organic, doesn't everyone else matter? But it's such a frustrating conversation to be like, yeah, that's not what Black Lives Matter means. That's not,
Right.
it means Black lives also matter. Gosh, it's so frustrating. And then knowing that about a parent, and then going, and then I'm going to have a deep conversation with you about mental health, and when you're clearly not recognizing flags of mental health issues in your president.
Yeah, that's also been a struggle, just like trying to separate that from, you know, the other stuff, because like literally other than that my dad's great, but then he'll say something and I'm like, why'd you have to say it?
Yeah. Or you're like, I love you, why are you saying that?
Yeah. Or there's another thing I wanted to mention. Crap. Oh, God damn it. Hang on.
It's
Wait,
okay.
what were we talking about? Oh, I know. Okay. So something that came up in the phone conversation that I had with my dad, that I tried to explain, but I was doing a terrible job explaining it, is that, because I mean, a huge reason why I have anxiety is because of my parents. And it's not that they were bad parents, it's just that they came from a different culture and I was raised here in America. And so this is a struggle that a lot of not only Filipino Americans struggle with, but also other second generation immigrants.
Yeah.
Because so for Filipinos, the idea of your life is that, actually, no, I'm going to rephrase that. There is a concept called kapwa, which means togetherness. And it means that you have an obligation to your fellow humans, so your family, basically, because you are a combination of, or no, you are a result of everything that the people before you have done. And because of that, you owe them everything. So it's always about paying
Ooh.
back the debt. Yeah, that's like how they view it.
Yeah.
Here in America, that's not the case.
No, it's like, that's a beautiful sentiment, but I can already see how that could be so stressful.
Right. And so that clash right there, where it's like in America, it's very much like every person for themselves, or like it's very individualized, where
Mm-hmm.
you go for your dreams. You like you can leave the house if you want, or like whatever. Like
Yeah.
it's very much about your own personal needs and wants, and not, I'm not saying Americans aren't close with their family, but the
I mean, they're
family
definitely,
values,
yeah, it's
yeah,
definitely different.
the values are different, where it's like American parents are like, yeah, whatever makes you happy. And it's different in the Philippines. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but
No,
like
it's just very different.
it's different. And so when I am growing up in a society that values being an individual, but then when I come home, the opposite is true. You're supposed to respect your elders, respect your parents no matter what. You never fight or like talk back or whatever.
Yeah,
That creates a lot of tension, because it's like,
absolutely.
who am I?
You're
Or like,
receiving
what
two
is
different
true?
messages. Yeah. Where it's
Yeah,
like, you go to
exactly.
school and you're being told, be whatever you want to be, chase your dreams. And your parents are like, as long as your dreams are one of these three things, and they include caring for us for the rest of your life. And you're like,
Yeah. And I mean, I actually had a conversation with my friend recently about this, where because I have always been like very American in that way, where like my parents were always telling me, you should be an engineer, you're so good at math, like you should be an engineer, because that's what my mom was. And I was like, no, I'm gonna be an artist, I'm gonna like do art. And I was talking to my friend who was the opposite, where because he is an only child, and when it was time to pick a major for college, he told me that he remembers being in the car with his mom and his grandma, and they asked him, what are you going to major in? And he was like, I don't know, like I'm kind of interested in maybe something creative, like, pursuing art. And they just laughed at him, and they were like, no, you're not. And then they told him, like, you should do business, because that was another choice. He was deciding between
yeah,
majoring in business or majoring in like studio art. And then he chose business because to him in that moment, um, like making his family happy was important, because he was like, you know what? Like, I am their only child. They've done so much for me. Like, he was very much Kapwa in
yeah,
that moment, in a way that like I never had been. But then when we were talking more, I realized like, oh, we actually, like, we kind of switched later down the road. So like now I'm sort of coming the other way. Like, I'm trying to figure out, okay, how can I use everything that I've done for myself to help other people in my
yes,
family and whatever. And then my friend is the other way, where now he's like, okay, I did the business thing, I have like a cool job, but now I want to explore what I want to do. And so I don't know why, I thought that was so beautiful, because it means like literally it doesn't matter what route you choose, because you're gonna come out the other way at the
yeah. Where
end.
it's like you can circle back to,
Yeah.
yeah, the idea that there is this hope for balance, that, or
Yeah.
just that, like, oh, me going out and pursuing a creative dream or something that's different than my parents doesn't mean I'm gonna leave them in the dust. You're gonna be like, I'm an artist and I'm never gonna talk to you again, and I'll be living on the beach. Like,
Right.
no. It's so interesting that, yeah, or that you could do so much geared toward what your family wants and hit a place where you're like, okay, I've achieved enough that I know that they'll be taken care of, and what do I really want to do now? Which,
Yeah.
that is like a beautiful uh, sentiment,
Mhm.
realization.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like the idea that your life will figure out a balance no matter what. So if you are lacking in something, like you'll figure it out at some point.
Yeah, which, like, it's almost feels kind of woo woo-y, but it does seem
I'm all
like,
about that.
yeah, I mean, it's LA, right? Where it's like, and maybe that's just a privileged point of view, or a point of view that comes from things just happen to have gone okay up to this point, but it does seem like you can go with the flow of life and things find a way of working out.
Life finds a way.
Yeah, and I almost said it too. And I was like, am I going to say life finds a way? Someone's going to say it.
I beat you to it.
You win. Well, it is just that, like, sort of accepting the ebbs and flows of life, which I think, for me, that concept, if I reel it in toward, like, my mental health and emotional just journey, I guess, it fits that as well. Like, if you can just accept when you're in these sort of erratic emotions and know that it's gonna ebb and flow, that whatever you're feeling right now won't last forever, and so just sometimes you have to be in it even if it sucks, but like you come out the other end okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully. You know, some people require more help for that. As far as like going to therapy and stuff like that, have you mentioned that to your parents? Have they had any thoughts on like therapy?
That was the first time I brought it up to them, or my dad. I actually don't know if my mom knows, just because I haven't brought it up, not because I'm like intentionally hiding it from her.
No.
She listens to all my podcasts and everything that I interview on, so they're gonna listen to this. So hi, Mom.
Hello. You have a wonderful daughter.
After I just talked a bunch of shit. No, yeah, so I actually brought it up with my dad on the phone in that conversation. I was like, I am seeing a therapist because I'm just remembering things about the conversation now, because when I brought up that I feel so nervous and stressed out all the time, he mentioned something about how like, oh, so you mean like how you're kind of short with me and like curt with me all the time. And I was like, I guess like because they seem to think that I am always just miserable. But that's part of that was me trying to keep a lot of stuff inside.
Absolutely.
Like
trying to put the smile on.
Right. Or like I wouldn't be putting the smile on. I would just, but then that would be showing because I'm just like, I felt so many things and just because there's a lot of things. I mean, everyone who like visits their parents has certain triggers, right? Like where the parents will say something. Yeah. And it triggers them. And then it's just like, you can't like get back. And so that happened to me a lot. And I'm just like, I don't want to be like that anymore. I don't want these triggers. It's exhausting. And I told him that. I was like, I'm seeing a therapist because I don't want to be this way anymore. I don't want you and Mom to think that I'm always miserable, because I'm not. It's just there's a lot of like, and I was I'm like, I love how like I'm slowly remembering things.
Like it's all coming back.
It's all coming back. So I mentioned something about like childhood trauma, and I immediately regretted it because I was like, oh no, I don't have like the tools to explain properly what I mean without him thinking that I'm calling him a bad dad.
Yeah. Oh no.
He was just like, yeah, and he was like, you had a good childhood. What do you mean childhood trauma? And I was like, oh no, I shouldn't have brought this up. But but yeah, like man. How. I mean, again, every child experiences this with their parents. Like my parents experienced this with their parents, even if they didn't have the vocabulary to know what it was.
Yeah, if they never had the time to go, oh, that was a trauma.
Exactly. And because they hear the word trauma and they go, well, that sounds so intense. And it's like, no, like it's something as simple as like me. Well, I just like had a realization now. It's like, I feel like part of why I don't like people smiling at me or like unwanted attention, like just out in like the world, is because I remember what it felt like to be a kid and have my parents always like telling me how to
smile.
Or like, actually, I don't think I explained that well. Like it would always, like, I always have like a hyper awareness of myself because I always felt their eyes on me. It was always like, why are you wearing that? Why do you look so, well, the word is morose. Like, why do you look so morose? And wait, where was I going with that?
Oh, so like now you're saying how like people just looking at you in regular life now. I could see how it's like, oh, you're immediately going to be thinking this person's judging me or has a thought about what I'm wearing or how I look, instead of being able to just go, that's a person smiling. It's like, that's a person who is smiling to tell me to smile is what's going on.
Yeah, I see it as a threat, and that's so sad.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting when you're able to, like, either in therapy or with work, start to realize how many things you didn't even realize were triggers.
Yeah. And I'm honestly, like, these last few months where I've been in therapy have been so helpful because my therapist has helped me view the way that I interact with my parents in a different way. Because, like, up until I started therapy, I've always seen it as like a battle where I'm just like, ugh, I wish my parents were a different way and I want them to change and they're not changing, and that makes me really mad. Like, it was a very like I'm pushing against them.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, now, like, she explains, like, I air out my frustrations. Like, I told her about that conversation and these comments that my parents make, and she reframes it for me in a way that makes me understand them better. And then it makes me not be so frustrated, because now I'm like, I can't be mad at my dad for not understanding mental health when, like, he's literally never been taught it. So I have an opportunity to teach it. So, like, this is a good thing, instead of me being frustrated he's not understanding. It's like, oh, I'm teaching him something.
Yeah, what a great opportunity to have a conversation that he has never gotten to have. And
right.
Oh man, the work that therapists do getting people with, same for me, I'm not saying the same, but the amount of things that have helped me just accept where my parents are at and stop. And I think it bleeds into more than just parents, but there's so much in life that you can't control, and being able to get to a place where you can go, okay, this is not a thing I can just change. This is how it is. How can I work from realizing this is the current situation?
Yeah.
Such a huge step. And I think such a gift for, your own mental health and sanity.
Yeah. And that's what even if you're not in therapy, this is something that everyone should know, is that, like, a lot of feeling frustrated or angry comes from not being able to control something that you're trying to control. Like, when you relinquish control, you become so free. Because now I'm not trying as hard to change my parents, and sort of just, like, accepting things for how they are. I mean, I do still try to convince them of other, like, political
of
stuff.
Course,
not,
no,
like,
that I'm like, I shouldn't go down this road, but
yeah, like, it depends, because, like, now we have, like, because we're on a, like, text group chat, and now I feel like they actually do listen, like, to me and my sister's thoughts on things. Like, they're asking us questions, instead of, because before it would just be like they'd send us something and then they'd be like, isn't this so terrible? But now it's like, why is it like this? Like, I still think their opinions are totally wrong, but at least it's, like, coming from a different place now, where they're actually asking, like, I want to know what you think about this, so I can think about it and see if I agree or not.
Yeah, where they're like, well, and that's interesting too, to go, okay, what is the perception of our children who were raised in a completely different setting? How are they viewing this?
Right.
I think that's such a huge, wow. I mean, kudos to you. Congrats. That's a great breakthrough in general. It's like, oh, great.
Thank you.
Do you feel like it's a priority, or it's important to eventually try to have more of those conversations about mental health? Or do you think it's a thing that for older generations, maybe just as it comes up, play it by ear, but focus more on the future and moving forward and how you can, work on yourself in future generations?
Right. I mean, the way that I approach it now is, like, I don't bring up anything that I know will, like, be a thing unless it comes up. Like, I'm not just gonna barge into their house and be like, let's talk about anxiety.
Yeah.
Like,
let's talk about depression. Like, you just have a PowerPoint.
Exactly. I mean, I don't know, maybe one day I'll do that. But yeah, yeah, when it comes up, and I've been working with my therapist on how to have future conversations like this, because the conversation I have with my dad could have gone a lot better, and I know that like if it comes up again, I think I have a much better grasp because I feel like I practiced it with my therapist, and I'm like, all right, cool. When he brings this up, I know what to say, and I'll feel good about it, and then there's not much we can do. Because like for example, I recently visited them for the first time since the lockdown. They live not too far away, but I mean, I'm a terrible daughter. So I
my mom could be my neighbor and I'd be like, I'll see you in a year. Love
yeah,
you,
right, like,
text me.
Exactly. So I was there, and we didn't have, I was there with my cousins, and we didn't have a whole lot of time to spend with them. And so I was like, oh, whoa, oh, was that
Hang
you?
on, sorry, just a second. I think I'm gonna pause it. All right, everyone, sorry for the brief pause. It was, as you all are well aware, the maniac dogs that I live with and love. Sorry, so you were saying you were visiting your parents.
Yeah, so I was visiting my parents, and my cousins were with me, and we didn't have a whole lot of time to spend there. So I thought, okay, maybe I can get through this half hour without something triggering me. Let's see if it happens.
What a challenge.
Yeah, right. And so, 5 minutes go by, 10 minutes go by. I'm like, oh my God, this might happen. And then like 15 minutes in, uh, my dad looks at me and goes, have you lost weight? And I paused because I wasn't sure what he was implying, because I don't know. I just my brain broke for a second.
I mean, that's a loaded question from anyone, but from your parents, you're like, are you concerned? Are you saying I look like I gained weight? Like,
yeah, it was just like I didn't know how to interpret it. But like to me, because like once I was diagnosed with high blood pressure, I was like, okay, I'm gonna eat a lot better, and I'm gonna work out regularly. Those are things I did not do, and those are things I should be doing anyway. So I was like, okay. So I have been eating a lot better, not eating as much takeout, cut down on alcohol and sugar, and have been working out pretty regularly. And then just as a result, I lost a lot of like belly weight. And I lost like 10 pounds in the last like couple of months. I wasn't intending to lose that much, but like it just happened. And so like to me, in the moment after I paused, I decided to take what he said as a good thing, because I was like, you know what? I know it was a good thing for me because I feel so much better.
yeah.
I'm not trying to lose any more weight, but like I feel so much better. So I was like, yeah, I lost 10 pounds. And I said it like in a happy, like I'm proud of myself kind of way. And he goes, why? And I was like,
God damn it.
I was just like, I just want to not talk about this anymore. And I was like, and I told him what I said to you. I was just like, I wasn't intending to do that. It just was a result of me taking better care of myself. And then my cousins chimed in, and they were like, oh, how did you lose the weight, and like whatever. And I was just like, yeah, just like eating better and stuff. And but then the rest of the time there, for the next like 15 minutes, it was all I could think about. It was all it was in my head.
Why did you
was
say
like,
that? Why did
he
this
say
come
that?
up?
Why did he say that? Exactly. And then it really wasn't until I left that I thought, okay, I think I know where he was coming from, is because the last conversation we had was that phone call, and I was telling him about how I've been so stressed. And then he sees me and I'm a lot skinnier than he remembers.
Yeah.
And maybe he's interpreting that as, are you worrying yourself sick?
That's interesting that it was like a place of maybe genuine just concern of,
Mm-hmm.
oh, she had said she was so nervous. And even that idea that like thinking that, oh, maybe I just missed it too much and it's more serious than I realize, or
yeah, I don't really know, but I brought that up with my therapist, and she was like, well, you've mentioned how you don't really have very deep conversations with your parents about your emotions, like their emotional intelligence isn't where you would like it to be. You've mentioned that before.
yeah.
And she said, like, well, what I'm seeing is that maybe your dad uses your physical appearance as a gauge of how you're doing, because that's what he can see, because you don't have the he can't ask you, how are you? And that would be a productive conversation. So what he does instead is comments on your weight, because
Yeah.
that's what he sees. And I was like, wow, you're a genius.
Therapists, a good therapist, like just having that outside viewpoint of,
Yep.
I'm not a part of this, and here's what I'm hearing, where it's from someone who's just completely not entangled in your life at all, is such a gift, because it's so hard sometimes to see outside your own triggers, your own stresses, especially in a relationship that's so, complex, like with our parents or close friends, partners.
Yeah. So I I mean that's I love my therapist. She is worth every single penny, because just moments like that, now I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna see my dad's comment as a negative thing. I'm gonna see it as like, that's his way of checking in on me. Like that's,
which is nice.
who cares? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna choose to see it that way and not be frustrated.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that so much. This is great. I don't think I have any more questions. This is so interesting. Obviously, you're a big advocate of therapy. Everyone listening, therapy. Highly recommend it. If you have access, hopefully someday we all will.
Oh, and also, here's a trick. I don't know how this is during the pandemic, but maybe you can figure it out. But I do know that I don't know how you go about doing this, but I've heard that if you go through people who are like currently studying to become therapists, or like, just fresh graduates, or people who are very, very new, you can get therapy for much, much cheaper.
Yes, there's a lot of sliding scale. I need to get more links to share with people. A few years ago, had a therapist who I think was in her, like, finalizing her PhD, and she was at this sliding scale space. She like changed the game for me. Like, there's so much I don't think I would have realized without that woman. And so you guys, if you're listening to this, you obviously have access to technology. I'll try to share some links, but if you look up sliding scale therapy in your state, there's a lot of options. And I think searching for a therapist in itself when you're not feeling well mentally can be extremely difficult. So that's just, starting with sliding scale, you can probably find either a foundation or a place that does sliding scale. And I can say from experience to anyone listening, if you're someone who has like anxiety about phone calls or whatever, because I have this weird anxiety about they're all gonna yell at me or whatever. I don't know. Now the dogs are yelling at me. They're like, we are all gonna yell at you. Oh, shush, Moki. Sorry, you guys. She's a loudmouth. She's a very sweet baby. But emphasis on the baby. It's all like, very professional customer service people. They're there to help you. They want to help you. So if for some reason your hang up with your mental health stuff is maybe feeling like a burden, or your problems you guys, the dogs that have just no shortage of energy. I wish I could be like them. Oh, someone else came in. It's my boyfriend. It's a very professional setup we run here, Sapphire.
The most professional.
Those are people who like want to help you. So if your hang up is, I don't want to bother anyone, maybe I'll just walk it off. Like,
that's literally
just call.
their job. Yeah,
it's like literally call, chat with them. They also, sliding scale places especially assess, based on need, because they only have so many appointments. So if you're like, maybe I need to see someone. If you really need to see someone, they will move you up the list and they'll go, let's get you in here right away.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it helps. So just,
there are solutions.
There are so many solutions out there, and we are very lucky to have access to.
Yeah. I would also like to recommend a podcast. I know this is obviously not a replacement for therapy, but this is a podcast I've been listening to a lot lately, and that has changed my life in a lot of ways. It's called The Happiness Lab.
I love that.
Yeah, it's so good. It's hosted by Dr. Laurie Santos. I think that's her name. And she's a professor at Yale.
At Yale, I'm taking her course. There's a whole course you can take.
Oh my God! Yeah.
That was, by the way, recommended by my therapist.
Nice.
Yeah, there's a whole, you can take a free course on this website, Coursera, and it's all about like the psychology of happiness. And I'm sure she probably goes way more in depth in this podcast. I'll link that in the show notes. Oh, I love that you listen to that. She's amazing. And it's,
she's great.
Yeah, everyone definitely check that out. And I'll also link the course if anyone's interested. You can take this Yale course from her for free, which is pretty rad.
Ooh, I can't believe I haven't done that yet. I need to.
No, I'll send you the link. It's like it just gives you exercises and stuff and starts this conversation. I did a whole. This is a vaudeville act at this point, guys. Yeah, they have like at the beginning they do a whole like what I thought was really cool. That there's a link to this character trait test, and it asks you all these questions, and then it ranks what your strongest, like your character traits by strength are, instead of going like this is a weakness. The weaker ones are just at the bottom, but it tells you a lot about yourself. And from there, the website they link you to gives you tools on like how can I utilize the fact that I'm socially intelligent and incorporate that in my career, or that I'm forgiving, or it's very, very cool. So I will link that in the show notes. I will also send it to you, Sapphire. And you have a podcast as well, right?
I do. It's called Stories with Sapphire. So if you're really into paranormal and supernatural stories, I narrate stories, I interview people who've had experiences, and I also have like some original poems. It's just a really serious paranormal podcast.
I love that.
That's your vibe.
I know it's such a switch from like mental health and now ghost stories.
Ghosts.
I love that. And I've had some ghost adjacent people on the podcast before, and I know that there are fans of that.
Can you connect me with them?
I mean, I could. Literally the people I've had are just layman types that are like, I love ghosts, and like they're not in the field at all.
But anyone who's like, if you know anyone, I like how this is now turned into this. If you know anyone who has had a
and she did have a paranormal experience, I would love to.
Okay,
I will connect you
to her
because that's what we talked about. I will put you in touch with her, Amy Shanker. For those listening who have listened to that episode, she's very funny and it's a great story. Awesome. And where can people follow you?
My Instagram and Twitter is @awkwardsapphire. I hate it, but I'm not changing it yet.
I love it.
And then YouTube is just my full name, Sapphire Sandalo.
Awesome. And there will be links to all that in the show notes. You guys go follow Sapphire, go get some fun paranormal stuff, and also check out the Happiness Lab as well.
Yes.
Note from both of us. And thank you for taking time to let me chat with you and pick your brain about all this.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. All right. Bye, everybody.